All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Unified Triplicity, where we will hopefully be able to dissolve some boundaries in your life that are blocking you from being able to see the deep spiritual truths that are all around us for everyone to see. So, without too much more of an introduction, I'd just like to give an explanation of what we will be discussing today. So there's a couple different aspects of what we will be discussing. One of the first things will be the brain structure, human consciousness, and then we will dive a little bit into Norse mythology and the Greek counterpart. More specifically, we will be talking about the character Odin from Norse mythology and Hermes Trismegistus, as I'm sure you see his staff behind me, and how all of these things correlate. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that we need to understand in this video is that we have a pretty unique brain as human beings. There are people that try to say that humans are just animals, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, we are animals, but we are not just animals. Obviously, we are not just animals. We have a pretty complex way of communicating that most other animals don't have. Our languages can be pretty complex. English is one of those weird ones that's hard for people to learn, and it's because it's really a mutt language that's pulled together from many different languages. But in order to understand what makes us so different, we have to understand the different components of our brain. I do not have a diagram to show you guys, but there are three basic aspects of our human brain that really, defines us. Okay, so the first thing, as I'm sure a lot of people know, we have that brain stem. Okay, it's connected to our spinal cord, and it's what connects that spinal cord to the rest of the brain. And that brain stem and the different areas of the brain stem are known as the R complex of the brain. Now, this is the reptile complex. It is one of the oldest, or it is the oldest aspect of our brain. Okay, this is what deals with our base instincts. It deals with our automatic heart rate, our blood pressure, our automatic breathing. If you have ever wondered why when you go to sleep you don't just stop breathing in the middle of the night, well, I guess some people do with sleep apnea, but that's a different thing. But there's a reason why our heart keeps going without us consciously being aware of it. There's a reason why our blood pressure is regulated without us necessarily monitoring it and being consciously aware of it. There is a reason why when we go to sleep, these things, our bodily functions keep going, and it's because this brainstem, our R complex, automatically takes care of that. Now, with that, there comes different aspects to it. Okay, so there's one particular part of the R complex called the cerebellum. Okay, this is split, or let's write the word first. Cerebellum. Okay, this gets split etymologically into ceres, bellum. Okay, why is that important? Because basic definition of ceres is seed, and the bellum is war in Latin. Okay, so that is the aspect of our brain that really is the master of war. It is what allows us to be able to really fight off an attacker if we've honed in the skills and really dive deep into survival base survival skills, martial arts. It's what allows us to be consciously aware of dangers that are around us. Our cerebellum is aware of the many dangers that we face, whether we're out in the city or out in the woods. It knows that we're consciously or constantly being watched by pretty much everything and everyone around us. Okay? So the cerebellum is the seed of war, or simply stated, the war seed. Okay? Further up, we have what's known as the limbic system. Basic understanding of it is it deals with hormones and it deals with emotions. Okay, this is known as our mammalian complex, or our mammal brain. Okay, and then what most people picture when they view a brain, this is a pretty crude drawing, but they see all these like weird ridges and stuff. That is what most people know as the human brain. It's what most people focus on. Okay, this would be our neocortex, or for more scientific terms, our telencephalon. This is what's known as our human brain. Okay, and that is split up the center into two different hemispheres, our left hemisphere and our right hemisphere. Older traditions and older scientific journals will attribute the more logical, mathematical, scientific side of our thought to the left brain, and our more artistic, creative, intuitive side to our right brain. Okay, now you might find some conflicting things online and more modern scientific journals. That's okay. Regardless, let's keep going. So that neocortex is responsible for our higher level thinking. Okay, it's what allows us to deal with complex issues. It allows us to deal with, higher level math, for example. Well, even just math in general. It's where we do a lot of computing and problem solving. Okay, while at the same time being able to come at things from an intuitive side, and a creative, artistic side as well. Now, the thing about human consciousness is most people operate out of an imbalance when it comes to these aspects of our brain, whether we're looking at left or right, or whether you look in modern scientific journals where it just talks about the neural pathways rather than these different modalities of thought occurring in specific hemispheres of the brain. That's not the point. The point is that we have to balance our intuitive side with our logical side. And there's a reason for that. If we just think from a logical point of view, we're only seeing things from one angle. We're only looking at it from one angle. This is what most people that I come across, at least, operate out of. It's a left brain imbalance where they're very left brain heavy, or very logical, and they don't see things from a very creative side. And ultimately, it's what causes a lot of issues when it comes to seeing the more spiritual side of life. Okay? Now, with the right brain imbalance, it creates different types of issues. It can be a serious emotional disaster. That's where a lot of people have problems with, drug addictions and other types of addictions, and just overall emotional problems, emotional disorders, diseases, whatever you would like to call them. It's not the point. The point is that operating out of a brain imbalance on either side ultimately will lead to problems. Now, the biggest problem of all is, as we know and as we hear, if you don't use it, you lose it. Not quite literally, but at the same time, there is quite a bit of literal logical truth to that. We can see that in the way our body works, You take some guy who's a big muscle head and you sit him on a couch for a couple months, and ultimately those muscles are going to atrophy. He's going to lose a lot of muscle mass. Okay, if he's not out running, if he's not out lifting weights, he's not going to keep that strength and that muscle mass that he had at one point. Now, if you don't use your brain in a proper way, it's not getting that exercise. And our brain is just like a muscle. It needs to be exercised. It needs to go through complex issues. And in order to really develop the problem-solving skills that we need to have in order to advance on a day-to-day basis. Because if we're not constantly exercising our brain, our bodies, then these are going to be areas of our body and ourselves ultimately that will start to atrophy. Okay? Now, the right side of, or the intuitive side of our brain is directly correlated and related to our limbic system. Okay, remember, that's our emotional center. Now, the left brain is directly correlated and linked to the R complex. Now, if you're in a left brain imbalance where you're highly logical and you're not using that creative, intuitive side, ultimately that limbic system, your emotional center, is going to start dwindling and it's not going to function the way that it's supposed to. This can be seen in many different symbols, but that we can discuss for another time, or at another time. And vice versa. Either way, if you're not operating out of a balanced brain, ultimately, whatever side you're leaning towards, the opposite side is going to lose its strength. Okay? Just like if you mainly focus on, lifting weights with your right side of your body, your left side's not getting that exercise, it's going to weaken while this one's going to get stronger. And ultimately, you're going to create a serious imbalance. And this is very, very dangerous when it comes to thought, because that's when you can create problems when it comes to emotional disorders such as psychopathy, sociopathy, narcissism, etc. Okay? Now, what happens when you operate out of a balanced modality of consciousness, when you run things through your logical side and intuitive creative side? Okay? It creates that balance, which allows you to see things from a completely different point of view. Okay? We live in 3 dimensions of space. Okay? We've got... Oh, here, let me use a ruler to make it a little bit less of a crude graph. Excuse me. Okay, anyone who's taken some basic mathematics classes, we got the x-axis and we've got the y-axis. Okay, so there's 1 dimension and 2 dimensions, but we typically only see that when it comes to math, but we forget that if we were to extrude that out, that creates that z-axis. There are your 3 dimensions of space. So in order to understand something in this physical domain, realistically we should look at things from no less than 3 completely different angles. Okay, well, in order to do that, you have to at least look at it from 2. You have to run it through the logical aspect of your consciousness and then through the intuitive side, or vice versa, whichever one you prefer. Doesn't necessarily matter, in my opinion, and I could be wrong. Okay, but when you look at things from 2 different points of view, you realize that there's another point of view that you can look at it from. And this is what creates more balanced, holistic thinking. Now, how does this tie into this symbol, Hermes Trismegistus, which is Mercury of the Roman mythology, and Odin of the Norse mythology? So here's the thing. Odin was pretty masculine character. He was a warrior, but at the same time, He was looked down upon by a lot of warriors because he used satyr magic, which was seen as a more feminine thing. Back at, well, at least in the Norse tradition, men who had that feminine side weren't looked upon very highly. However, it's what ultimately made him the All-Father. It's what ultimately made him powerful enough to take that throne and sit on that throne and rule over the 9 realms. I erased my drawing of Yggdrasil, but that's okay. We get the general point. Now, Odin represents that balance, that sacred alchemical union between those modalities of thought. Your logical aspect, which is your masculine, and then your intuitive, creative side, which is your feminine. Now, as with electricity, there is the positive, there is the negative, which is your masculine and feminine aspects, but then there's also the ground. It's your neutral. Okay, it's the blending of the two. Now, this is really important to understand. When you create that blending and you create that balance, it's ultimately what allows for things to really thrive and grow. Okay, it's what made Odin so powerful, and ultimately it's what made Hermes so powerfully insightful when it came to the knowledge that was attributed to him. And this can be seen in his staff. So we have, and this is also seen in the Tree of Life in Kabbalah and in Yggdrasil as well. For better reference, this is the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. As you can see, there is the left-hand path, which is the path of severity. There's the right-hand path, the path of mercy, and then there's that middle path, which is the path of will, or simply put, the path of mildness, the path of balance. Okay? And this can be seen right here. You've got the left-hand path, the right-hand path, and that center pole, okay, representing the pillar of severity, or the path of severity, the path of mercy, and the path of mildness, or the path of the will. Okay, now this also corresponds to the chakras. You've got levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The wings of Hermes, or Mercury, creates number 6, and then the very top of the pole is the crown chakra. It represents enlightenment in man. Excuse me for a second. Okay, now to get on to a little bit more about Odin. So some people can also see where it correlates in other areas of our life. Okay, so we've got that blending of the masculine and feminine, the red and the blue to make the purple. The purple corresponds, or the violet corresponds to that crown chakra, as we've discussed before. Okay, you blend those two, it creates the balance, it allows you to look at things from a different point of view. All right, so we can see it when it comes to language, and when it comes to even the structure of our week. Okay, Odin, and I believe it was Anglo-Saxon, Odin is Woden, which is where we get Wednesday from. Wednesday is Woden's day. Okay, so this is your Woden's day. Now, how does that fit in? Okay, well, if we were to look at our calendar week that you see on every single calendar, it starts with Sunday, then goes Monday, and then goes Tuesday. And then here comes Wednesday, or Woden's Day. And then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So there we go. Right there you can see Odin's Day is blending the first 3 with the last 3 days of the week. Okay, there's your balancing point. You can see it right here. Now, here's where it gets kind of weird, because a lot of people don't understand how to apply green language, okay? Alchemical green language, the language of the birds. It's understanding as many different aspects of what you're looking at when it comes to language as you possibly can, when it comes to sounds, when it comes to etymology, when it comes to just basic definitions and how the definitions have changed over time. Okay? So, you've got Wednesday, but if you were to say it how it is spelled, you get Wednesday. Now, follow me here. Take that G or that S, put a GS, and you've got Weddings Day. Now, traditionally, what is a wedding? It is a sacred union, or at least supposed to be, between the male and the female. Now, this can even be seen when it comes to homosexual relationships most of the time, because most of the time you'll see a more masculine character, whether you're looking at the males or the females. Okay, you'll see the more masculine character and the more feminine character. You'll see sometimes a big buff dude with a really skinny dude, and it gets kind of weird. But even within the homosexual community, they're still looking for that male-female aspect. And it's kind of weird like that. Okay? So, there's just a couple different ways that you can see what Odin really represents. Now, as far as this symbol goes, and how it ties all in, Odin gave his eye for knowledge and for true sight to be able to see, how he was going to die, not necessarily when, but how he was going to die, okay, and ultimately to bring his people the power of runes, okay? And how this ties back into this symbol, okay, as we know, Hermes, or Mercury, is the messenger of the gods, okay? So, what is this symbol? It's the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, otherwise known as the caduceus, or caduceus. Now, basic etymology of the caduceus, or caduceus, however you would like to say it, does not matter to me, comes from the Greek kerux, okay, which means a herald. Well, what is a herald? A herald is a messenger or a bringer of good news. So that's how all that ties back in to Hermes, who ties into Odin. That this would be Odin's spear, although that top little piece, this is just one interpretation of the staff. There's other interpretations that actually has a spearhead at the top, okay? It'd be Odin's spear, it'd be Hermes or Mercury's staff, okay? Just so everybody is clear on that. Now, I'd like to really address this aspect, okay? when it comes to figuring out how to balance out your consciousness, sometimes people need a guide. Sometimes people need that help, okay? It's hard to figure out how to do it on your own. It can create a lot of problems between yourself and your family, between yourself and your friends, because not everybody knows brain balancing techniques. For myself, what I would do is I would follow a practice of Wim Hof breathing and certain exercises, including yoga, small amounts of yoga. I don't do it too much, but I also do physical exercises such as lifting weights. Sometimes I like to run. My thing has been lifting weights. It allows me to really physically exert myself while at the same time contemplating and concentrating on certain areas that I need to work on, because that's ultimately the goal here. Okay, through the 7 chakras, it's not just to, open that crown chakra and reach enlightenment, because you're not going to reach enlightenment if you're not operating out of a balanced mode of consciousness. So you have to bring balance within yourself, okay? And this can be seen in many different TV shows. I plan on covering at least one episode on how you can see these 3 aspects of our brain and ultimately our modalities of consciousness in Dragon Ball Z. Seeing the 7 chakra system in Avatar: The Last Airbender, for example, is ultimately what got me started on all this when I was a younger kid. And it's a power that I wanted to understand and possess for myself, and I came across it. I learned how to do it. It's a practice daily, okay? But if you are somebody who is struggling with balancing your mental state, if you're struggling with some sort of depression, anxiety, okay, seek somebody who has been there before and found their way out, okay? That's going to be your best bet. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. If you want to try and figure it out yourself, I don't recommend it, because I've been there and I tried to do it myself, and it's a struggle, okay? So try and find somebody who's been there and done that, and hopefully you guys can get this too, okay? Now, with that being said, I hope everybody gets something out of this. If you did, please, like, comment, subscribe, share, do whatever you would like to do, okay? If you find that somebody in your life close to you can possibly learn and benefit from this, please share it with them. Even if it's just one person, even if I can help one person out on this journey that we call life, then I feel like I've done at least my job for the day, okay? I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. Ultimately, even though there's a lot of frustration in the world today, love is one of the basic fundamental principles that we need to adopt and practice in our day-to-day lives if we're going to see any sort of positive change in this world. And this is one way that you can bring yourself to a state of balance. That way you can understand what true love is between one person and another. Whether it's between you and your best friend, you and your mom or dad, you and your wife or husband, you and your child, or even if it's just you and a stranger. Love is one of the aspects that we need to adopt, okay? So again, I hope you got something out of this. If you didn't, please ignore it, okay? Or better than that, don't ignore it and keep searching until you find the truth in what the fuck I'm saying. All right. I love you guys. Please have a great rest of your day. Be safe out there. Be smart. And most importantly, be balanced.